Recently in Hanoi, Solar Electric Vietnam GSC, SEV, and ABB in Vietnam co-organized the conference Solar Energy Technology Solutions for Green Growth with the purpose of accelerating green and sustainable growth, in which the application of solar energy solutions is considered to be an exceptional option in the current economic development context.
Đầu tiên là định hướng cho tất cả những người mà tham dự hiểu tổng quan về các hệ thống về điện năng lượng mặt trời. Cái thứ hai là mong muốn giới thiệu để cho tất cả mọi người biết được rằng là thế giới người ta đã phát triển rất là sâu, rất là mạnh rồi về cái phần năng lượng mặt trời này rồi, và Việt Nam thì đang là nước đi sau. Đấy, và bây giờ đang phụ thuộc rất nhiều vào công nghệ về nhiệt điện, than, rồi khí và các thủy điện lớn. Ví dụ như vừa rồi thì đang có cái vùng lũ đấy, thủy điện xả lũ chẳng hạn. Đó, thì mình mong muốn rằng là mọi người thấy rằng là cái hệ thống năng lượng mặt trời này nó thực sự nó đem lại hiệu quả.
Decision number 11 issued by the Prime Minister on the 11th of April 2017 has brought about the feed-in tariffs for solar power. Accordingly, organizations and individuals involved in the development of grid-connected solar power projects, no-roof solar power applied, are entitled to a lot of land incentives and output support. This creates a preferential mechanism for encouraging the development of solar energy in Vietnam. Hello everyone, welcome to Sharing Vietnam on VTC Thai Net Việt. In today's program, we welcome Mr. Rene Broem, the representative from GIZ, who is an expert with 15 years experience in environmental and renewable energy, and he will talk about the investment opportunity in solar power investment in Vietnam. Thank you, Mr. Rene, so much for spending time with our program today. Could you share with us some of the achievements between GIZ and Vietnam in terms of exchanging, of developing solar energy in Vietnam?
Yes. So GIZ has started in 2009 already in the energy sector supporting Vietnam, and in the first years that was basically wind energy. So to introduce the feed-in tariff, for example, for wind energy, and on the other side, to help to prepare the market and to build capacities in the market. One thing was that GIZ has financed wind measuring devices so that we can have 1 or 2 or 3 years of wind measurements by now. That also helped the financing side, that also helped the banks to understand the project side and to assess the project side to reduce the risks, and that's the costs for the loans. On the other side, there have been a lot of trainings for wind energy, but also recently for solar power. So just recently, last month, there was a big training week organized by GIZ in Ho Chi Minh City, where local companies, local partners were trained in all aspects of solar power project development.
Could you share with us your thoughts regarding the potential of the solar energy development in Vietnam?
I think Vietnam has a very high potential for solar energy, and that comes from maybe there are different reasons. One, of course, is the resource. So solar irradiation is very high, especially in the south of Vietnam, but also in central Vietnam. Vietnam has a very strong industrial basis. It's a big FDI market, and it has in general a quite attractive, let's say, business framework. The electricity demand in Vietnam increases by more than 10% every year. And Vietnam has relied a lot on coal power in the past. Now, because the demand is so high, so domestic coal is not enough anymore. So that means that a lot of hard currency is leaving the country to import the fuel, the coal. We already see some major problems with air quality in the bigger cities. And especially here in Hanoi, this is very much related to the many coal power plants that are around here in northern Vietnam. So solar is a solution for that, together with other renewable energy sources like wind energy, where there are also very good resources in Vietnam, bioenergy, there's a lot of rice husk or residues from the sugar production. So we have a wide range, including hydropower, that has been a traditional source of energy already for the past decades.
What about the challenges for Vietnamese enterprise when they're considering of investing into solar energy?
Very recently, Vietnam has introduced a legal framework, a support framework for solar power investments. So there's a feed-in tariff for the larger systems that are grid connected, the solar farms. And there's a net metering that can support investments on roofs, on commercial roofs, on factories, but also on residential roofs, so on households. And this net metering means that you can basically use the grid as a battery. So if your roof produces more solar power than you need in the building, then you can export it to the grid and later on you can have it back. So you have a bidirectional meter. So this is a very common support scheme worldwide. So let's say this is a good step and this is a good first step as a framework. But if we look into the details, there are also a lot of challenges for investors. To get the feed-in tariff, you have to sign a power purchase agreement, basically a power contract with the EVN, Electricity of Vietnam. And this is quite, let's say, a procedure and some kind of administrational process. The big projects have to be included into the power master plans. You have to get an investment license and so on. And we know from other markets, from other successful solar markets, that the markets are successful and the solar costs are low in those markets where these procedures are simple and give the investor a lot of security for his investment and a short time for waiting for permits or one-stop shops for permitting and licensing.
In the past 4 years, REC has taken the experience of Singaporean clean technologies to Vietnamese constructors in the context of a rising demand for solar technology in infrastructure projects of Vietnam.
We are very excited to enter Vietnam because the thing is, this is the new emerging market, which is the capacity installed is only 10 megawatt, where from the information I got from the MOIT, they are have an aggressive target. By 2020, they want to install about 850 megawatt. So we have this kind of goal to work with the local EPC. REC have at least 3 partners in Ho Chi Minh and then 2 partners in here. Most of them is EPC, but mainly is the main contractor. They build, they design, so it's a good, it's a good advantage for them to add the panel on their roof. REC is producing a half-cut cell, which is very unique feature for solar panel, which we can produce a higher watt class and higher efficiency.
For years, countries in the region such as Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, China or Korea have considered the direction of renewable energy development as a national policy. Thus, solar energy in such places is strongly developed and accounts for a significant proportion in the power distribution structure. While electricity production in Vietnam is still not enough to meet the domestic consumer demand, Singapore is over capacity. International models are a necessary experience for Vietnam's renewable electricity planning.
Currently, does Vietnam have an encouraging policy to support private enterprise to switch from traditional energy use to the renewable energy and the solar power in particular?
I think the framework that we have today is still a little bit puts a lot of burden and a lot of challenge to the investors because we have some issues with bankability related to the power purchase agreement, for example. Maybe for the domestic investors, the risks that are involved at the moment and the challenges are a little bit lower because domestic investors are used to the current framework and to the specific legal and business framework in Vietnam. But I would still say the framework can still be improved. Reducing risks always means making investments cheaper, making them easier. For rooftop solar, I would be a bit more, let's say, optimistic regarding the framework because there are so many companies and manufacturers in Vietnam, domestic manufacturing but also international manufacturing, that can a bit more easily invest in a rooftop system. It's smaller, it's not so complicated, the licensing is much less. And we have already seen many large systems on rooftops, a 1 megawatt system on Sao Mai Group in the south, or a few hundred kilowatt systems on factories already now.
15 years of bringing international expertise to Vietnam. What are some of the international models that Vietnam can learn from?
There's a lot of experience worldwide, and a lot of markets have let's say, developed solar PV quite a bit in the last decades. Especially Germany has basically ramped up a capacity of 40 gigawatt of solar in the last 1 or 2 decades, and this is also why GIZ, the German Development Corporation, is present here and is offering support and advice to the Vietnamese government, and also supports pilot projects on the local level. I think models that have been successful are, on the one side, technology models. I think this is not so much the problem. They are all available in Vietnam. So one thing is having a power producing plant. The other one is to have an intelligent system that also helps the grid, the network operator, to operate the net efficiently and successfully. And since solar energy is intermittent, it's fluctuating, we need to take care a lot about this intelligence of the PV systems.
Besides the high technologies, what are the other things regarding policy and decision making that Vietnam can also learn from these advanced countries?
The wind is there, the sun is there, the fuel is for free, so there are no costs related to the fuel. And the operation, the maintenance costs are very low. We talk about 1 to 3% of the investment per year that are operation and maintenance costs. That also means that the investment costs, the capital costs in the beginning, are relatively high. And this often is, let's say, an obstacle or an issue for investors. So what you can do is to choose certain business models to tackle this issue. One of them could be you lease a PV system, you don't buy it, you can rent it or lease it. Another one is to have a third party, someone else, invest on your roof, for example, and this party sells the kilowatt hours to you, the consumer. And for this, the framework conditions in Vietnam are not yet there, because EVN has the so-called single buyer of electricity monopoly, so only EVN can buy electricity. So this could be something that the regulator, the government, could change in the future. Well, you do see this in Japan, you partly see that in Thailand, which is a quite successful market in the closer region. And there we see that these business models are really attracting investments more than if you only rely on an investor has to invest, fully invest into the system. So I would say there are some good examples already in Southeast Asia, in Asia.
Thank you, Mr. Rainer, so much for all your sharing today. So that's the end of our program today. Thank you so much for watching us. Hopefully we had provided you with useful information regarding the opportunity for Vietnam to engage in renewable energy, especially solar energy. Any questions and recommendations, please email to sharingvietnam@netviettv.net. Thank you and see you again.